Last year I spent nearly 3 months in an old apartment building. I'm still pretty young and was just starting out on my own. It was inexpensive, despite being in a halfway alright part of town. The place was pretty dated, with old blue wallpaper in the halls, but I wasn't about to complain. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment where I kept furniture to a minimum to make it seem a bit roomier. I was settling in pretty well during the first couple of months. That's when the arguments began out in the hallway. It took me a few weeks to realize that this building was quite vacant. I lived on the second floor, which had about 10 different apartments. During my time there I only saw 2 neighbors, not counting the lady in the wall. You wouldn't know this unless I told you, but I had to pause for a couple of minutes to ease the trembling in my hands. It's been nearly a year, but just daydreaming about what I saw that night has given me more than a couple of panic attacks. It was the beginning of August when I first heard her voice. It was just past midnight and I was still up, browsing my laptop on the couch. It was a high-pitched feminine shout that startled me. I paused for a moment as I heard a woman with some sort of thick accent shouting in the hall. One of my neighbors was an elderly man, who seemed reluctant to say anything more than a quiet hello. The other was a middle-aged woman named Elizabeth, with whom I'd had a bit of small chat. Listening in, I could tell it was neither of them. In fact, I didn't hear anyone else, except the foreign-sounding woman. She was pacing quickly in the halls for a couple of minutes. All I could make out of what she was saying was that she seemed to want someone to leave her alone. I'm a timid guy. I thought about heading out to see if she was alright, but since I didn't hear anyone else I assumed maybe she was on the phone. After about 10 minutes I decided to drown it out by putting on some headphones and listening to music. It was effective enough. After the 4th song went off I no longer heard any shouting coming from outside. I shrugged it off as a strange incident and headed to bed. The next night played out almost the same. I'd been in a plumbing apprenticeship for about a year at the time and the days could get pretty exhausting. I crashed on the couch around 10 that night, before being woken up again by that same woman shouting in the halls. I muttered under my breath as she paced angrily not far from my door. After several minutes I decided I didn't want this to be a habit. I got up and headed to my front door. I was hesitant for a moment when the shouts suddenly turned into small cries. She must have really been going through a rough time, I thought to myself. But again I found myself reluctant to follow through and went to spend the rest of the night in my bedroom. The next morning I saw my neighbor Elizabeth and asked her about it. She laughed nervously at first and claimed not to hear anything. I described it to her, noticing an increased fear in her eyes as she nodded with each detail I gave. "Just leave her alone," said Elizabeth sternly. "She's a troubled old woman and that's all. She gets like this around this time of year, but it'll be over soon. So mind your business." I'd never seen Elizabeth quite like that. I decided to take her advice for a couple of weeks, going to bed earlier, and putting on some music. I was mostly able to mask those frustrating 30 minutes per night that the woman outside spent shouting. All I had to do was get through the rest of the month that way. I'd started making some friends in the area. I'm a pretty introverted guy, but they decided to drag me out clubbing that night. I had a single drink and then mostly just hung around close to them. I took a cab back to the apartment, and arrived, yes as you probably guessed, close to midnight. I didn't have enough alcohol to get drunk, so I doubt my experience could be explained away as some sort of pink elephant scenario. Just a few steps into the hall of the second floor my eyes were drawn to the wall on my right. Between the door to my apartment and the one closer to where I was standing, I saw a piece of the wall open. I saw no sign of hinges, nor a knob, but the wall opened like a proper door. I paused, confused at first as I watched a figure walk out. There was that shrill foreign voice I'd been hearing that month. The way she walked gave the impression she was quite elderly, though it took a minute before she showed her face. She wore a red scarf, covering her head, and her dark red dress appeared filthy. Once outside the wall she turned quickly to face the door, pointed at it and screamed. "Out of this house! Get out of here! Leave me be!" I took a couple of slow steps forward, freezing again when she suddenly scuttled away from the door, brushing her body with her hands and shrieking. It was as though she's just walked into a spiderweb. "Are you Al?" I couldn't finish my sentence as she finally turned to face me. She walked towards my direction, stopping about 5 feet away. She didn't stare directly at me. In fact, she didn't even seem to notice me. I noticed however that there was something very off about her look. Her look reminded me of old pictures I'd seen of people with a severe case of leprosy. Although the color of her skin wasn't that of a normal person. She appeared greenish, and her eyes weren't visible. In fact, all I noticed that whole time were dark empty holes, though I can't say for sure that they were missing. "Vermin. You ugly, Ugly vermin. She charged back towards the strange door, shouting into there again. From inside I heard what sounded like a strange vibration. It was similar to that sound microphones sometimes make that cause people to cover their ears. This sound didn't quite have that effect, but something about it filled me with dread. "No, you leave. You. I said you." She kept pointing inside and then motioned for something inside to leave. The anger in her tone suddenly turned to fear as she rushed away from the door, again brushing some invisible web from her body. After about 5 seconds she banged her head hard against the wall, followed by some light sobbing. I was urged again to say something, but refrained as I contemplated what I was seeing. I realized now her hands also had a greenish-brown look, and had a bit of bone showing through. I took a step back when she made a blood-curdling screech. "Haven't you punished me enough?" She charged the door again, and rushed inside. It remained open and she continued to argue with whatever was in there. I wanted to get back to my apartment, lock the door and hide under the covers. At the same time I wanted to bolt back downstairs, but feared something was waiting for me. After several minutes of yelling from within the wall I rushed for my apartment door. I couldn't help but glance inside as I rushed by. Inside, all I saw was what looked like a small closet with a couple of shelves on the side. The lady inside was yelling at the wall, with only some strange vibration sound coming from inside. I struggled to open my door as the woman walked back out. That was when I saw something else slip out of that door. The woman turned and let out a distressed moan. "Oh no! Oh please, don't take me back. This is my home. Don't take me back there. Don't punish me anymore." I would say that her voice sounded tearful, but I doubted she was capable of producing them. They looked like spider legs. About 4 or 5 crooked, dark, sharp-looking things, clacking together as they clutched the woman's clothes. She continued to beg as I took several steps back. Whatever was inside didn't notice me, or maybe didn't care. The spider legs lifted the woman about a foot off of the floor and dragged her back inside as she screamed. Once inside, the door and the wall closed, sealing itself until there was no sign it had ever been there. I stood, frozen for a moment, wondering what the hell I'd just witnessed. It was strange going back to silence after such a tumultuous event. I was shaken from the deceptive quiet as a face stretched out behind the wall. It appeared to be the old woman's face, screaming again. All around her part of the wall poked out, shaped like those giant spider legs. They rested all around her face for a few seconds before pulling it apart. That was all I saw before rushing out of there. I was up the rest of that night, looking for any place that remained open. Around dawn I grabbed a cab and took an hour-long trip to my parents' home. I quit the plumbing apprenticeship and managed to land a job as a gardener. The bedroom where I sleep now has various paintings, and trinkets all over the walls. I also have a flat screen mounted, and a desk with a computer. I use an air mattress, which I try to keep centered in my bedroom. It's a bit inconvenient for getting around, but I'm still not comfortable sleeping too close to walls. I still have no idea what was going on that night. Sometimes I have days where I can't stop thinking about looking for answers. Who was she? What was that thing? Was any of it real? I don't know what I would do with any of that information. All I want to do is forget. Writing all of this out is hopefully one way I can take these thoughts and put them somewhere else. One of these days I'll be able to walk down a narrow hall again. I just know that the day I decide to do so, I might see her again. I might also end up seeing the rest of the thing that dragged her back into the wall.